Listen to that sound. The pan is already hot, and the first thing that lands in it is carne seca, cut into small pieces, sizzling like it's announcing itself. The aroma comes up fast, salty and deep, and then I add a little garlic and let it bloom just until it turns fragrant. If you've ever been to Brazil's northeast, you know this smell doesn't just make you hungry, it pulls you somewhere. It's comfort, it's Sunday lunch, it's a kitchen with the windows open and someone calling your name from the next room. I'm making Baião de Dois, the real, northeastern kind, with the ingredients that belong here: rice, feijão verde, carne seca, and queijo coalho. And I'll walk you through it calmly, step by step, because this is the kind of recipe that looks simple, but it has a few details that decide whether it turns out creamy and perfect or just heavy and mashed together. Before anything else, let me say the one thing people rush past: the beans. Feijão verde needs to be cooked separately first. Not together with the rice, not thrown in raw hoping it'll behave. Separately. That way you control the texture, you keep the beans tender but whole, and you decide how much of that flavorful broth goes into the final mix. That's the difference between baião that's creamy and balanced, and baião that turns into mush. Back to the pan. The meat is browning now, those crispy edges forming, and that's flavor you can't fake. I stir, scraping the bottom, letting everything toast just a little. This is where the dish starts building its backbone. In a moment, we'll bring in the rice and let it absorb what's happening here, then we'll reunite it with the beans at the right time, when both are ready to meet each other without losing themselves. If you're enjoying this kind of Brazilian home cooking, go ahead and leave a like so I know to bring more classics like this. And while we're here, tell me in the comments, what's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? Now stay with me, because the next step is where the kitchen starts smelling like the Northeast for real, and we begin layering everything into one pot. Listen to that sound right now, carne seca hitting the hot pan, and it's not just noise, it's a promise. I've got it already desalted and pulled into rough shreds, because the goal is flavor without turning the whole dish into a salt bomb. A drizzle of oil, then in goes the beef, and I let it sit for a moment before I move it. That first contact is where you build the base, a little browning, a little crisp edge, and that deep, smoky smell that feels like a kitchen in the Northeast with the windows open and lunch taking its time. Now I slide in chopped onion, and as soon as it touches the heat it starts to melt into the beef. Garlic follows, just enough to perfume everything, not burn. If you've ever made a dish where the garlic went too far and turned bitter, you know why I'm watching it closely. I'm stirring gently, and you can see the pan picking up those brown bits at the bottom. That's pure taste. When it looks glossy and the onion is soft, I add a touch of black pepper and a pinch of cumin, not to overpower, just to give that subtle warmth that belongs here. While that's building, let's talk about the detail that separates an okay baião from the real thing: the beans. Feijão verde needs its own moment. I cooked it separately until it's tender but still holding its shape, and I saved the cooking liquid. That broth is gold. If you throw dry beans straight into the rice, you'll chase the timing, and by the time one is done, the other is tired. Here we control texture on purpose. If you're enjoying how straightforward this is, tap like so I know you want more Brazilian classics like this. And tell me in the comments, what's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? Food, music, places, traditions, anything. Now stay with me, because in the next step we bring in the rice and that bean broth, and this is where the kitchen smell turns into pure comfort. Now listen to that sound. The carne seca is already in the pan, and it's doing exactly what it should, sizzling, browning at the edges, releasing that deep, salty aroma that feels like a warm breeze from the Northeast. I keep the heat at medium, because we're building flavor, not rushing. A little splash of oil goes in only if the pan looks too dry, and then comes the garlic right when the meat is ready to perfume it, not burn it. The second the garlic hits, the smell changes. It gets sweeter, rounder, almost nostalgic. While that happens, let's talk about the part that makes Baião de Dois truly work: the beans. I cooked the feijão verde separately, just until tender, and I saved some of that cooking broth. This is the detail people skip, and it's why their rice turns gummy or their beans vanish into the pot. We want the beans intact, with that gentle bite, and we want control over the moisture. That's how you get creamy without becoming mush. I slide in chopped onion, let it turn translucent, then I stir everything together slowly, scraping the bottom of the pan where the flavor is stuck. Those little brown bits are pure gold. If you can smell it through the screen, you're doing it right. And if you're enjoying this kind of Brazilian comfort food, tap like so I know to bring more recipes like this. Now the rice goes in, and I coat every grain in that seasoned fat, letting it toast for a minute. It's a small step, but it pays off in texture and aroma. Then I start adding liquid gradually, a bit of the bean broth first, then water if needed, just enough for the rice to cook without drowning. I want you to notice the rhythm here: stir, listen, adjust. The pot should feel alive, not flooded. Here comes a question for you. When you think of Brazil, what's the first flavor that comes to mind? Something sweet, something spicy, something smoky? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more Brazilian dishes explained clearly, in a way you can actually cook alone, go ahead and subscribe, because in the next step, the beans return to the pot, and everything starts to come together. Now that the beans are cooked separately and still holding their shape, I turn the heat down and let them rest for a minute. You'll notice the broth looks golden and lightly cloudy, almost like it already knows where it's going. That's the secret to Baião de Dois that feels creamy without getting heavy. You control the moisture before anything touches the rice. Over here, the carne seca is already doing its thing in the pan. It's sizzling, edges turning crisp, and every time I stir, that smell comes up with the garlic and a little onion like a warm gust from a northeastern kitchen. If you've never cooked with dried beef before, don't worry, once it's been desalted properly, it becomes pure flavor, not just salt. I let it fry just enough to get those brown bits on the bottom of the pan, because that's where the depth lives. Then I go in with the rice. The grains hit the fat and start to toast, and you can actually hear the sound change, from wet to dry, like tiny clicks in the pan. I stir slowly, making sure the rice gets coated, so it won't clump later. And now comes the moment that decides the texture. I start adding the beans, not all at once, but in generous spoonfuls, along with just enough of their broth to loosen everything. You want it moist, not soupy. If it looks too dry, a splash more broth. If it looks too loose, give it a minute and let the rice drink. I keep tasting as I go. A little black pepper. Maybe a pinch of cumin if you like that earthy note. And when it starts to come together, the pan looks like a patchwork: rice, green beans, strands of carne seca, everything glossy and alive. If you're enjoying how simple this is, leave a quick like so I know to bring more real Brazilian classics like this. And tell me in the comments, what's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? In a second, we're going to fold in the queijo coalho at just the right time, so it softens but still stays proudly firm. Now that the beans are already cooked on their own, they're exactly where we want them, tender, but still holding their shape, with a broth that smells like bay leaf and home. I'm not dumping everything in at once. I'm doing it the way people do it in the Northeast when they want that creamy finish without turning the whole pan into porridge. The carne seca has been sizzling for a while now, browned on the edges, and the garlic is just starting to go golden. Listen to that sound. That's flavor being built. I scrape the bottom of the pan with a wooden spoon, because all those little stuck bits are gold. Then in goes the cooked rice, and I stir it slowly, letting each grain get coated in that fat and seasoning. It's a simple moment, but it changes everything. The rice stops being just rice and starts smelling like the base of the dish. Now I add the beans, but gently. A ladle at a time, with a little of their broth. This is the detail that makes the difference. You control the moisture. You want it moist and creamy, not soupy, not dry. I keep stirring, and you can see it come together, the rice and beans hugging each other, the colors turning warm and inviting. I taste right here, before anything else. Need salt? Maybe not, because carne seca can be intense. A pinch of black pepper, maybe a little more onion, and I give it a minute to cook as one, so the flavors stop competing and start blending. The kitchen smells like a Sunday lunch. It's the kind of aroma that makes people wander in and ask, "What are you making?" If you're enjoying this so far, hit like so you don't lose the recipe later, because now comes the part everyone waits for. I lower the heat and fold in cubes of queijo coalho. Not shredded, not melted into nothing. Cubes. I want them to soften, get glossy, but still stay slightly firm when you bite. I cover the pan for a short moment, just enough to trap the steam and warm the cheese through. When I lift the lid, the smell is even deeper, and the baião is thick, creamy, and alive. And now, before I plate it, there's one last touch that makes it feel truly finished, and it's right here. What's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? And if you want more authentic Brazilian recipes like this, subscribe, because the next step is where this dish really shines. Now I lower the heat and just watch it for a moment. The rice has absorbed all that savory broth, the feijão verde is tender but still holds its shape, and the carne seca is tucked into every bite like a little surprise. This is the point where Baião de Dois stops being ingredients in a pan and becomes that comforting, northeastern kind of food that makes the whole kitchen feel warmer. And here comes the detail I never rush: the queijo coalho goes in at the very end. I fold in those cubes gently, almost like I'm tucking them under a blanket, and I let them sit for just a minute with the lid on. Not long enough to disappear, not long enough to melt into strings like mozzarella. Just enough to soften on the edges and stay slightly firm in the center, so when you scoop a spoonful, you get that salty, milky bite against the smoky beef and the creamy beans. I turn the spoon through the pan one last time, and you can hear it, that quiet, thick sound of a dish that's right. No mush, no dryness. That's why we cooked the beans separately before mixing. It's the difference between pretty good and this is the real thing. The aroma is garlic, onion, beef, and something earthy from the beans, like the smell of a countryside kitchen after a long day. If you're serving it the traditional way, this is when you bring it to the table still steaming, with people hovering nearby, pretending they're not waiting. I taste it and adjust with a final pinch of salt if needed, maybe a touch of black pepper, and then I stop. Baião de Dois doesn't need to be complicated. It needs to be honest. If this recipe made you feel even a little closer to Brazil, leave a like so I know you want more dishes like this. And tell me in the comments, what's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? Is it the food, the music, the regions, the traditions? And if you want more Brazilian recipes explained clearly, step by step, in a way you can actually cook along with, subscribe and come with me to the next one.